When doing case study research, it's important to identify your research objectives and be clear about a number of specific things. And so I'm going to draw on Alexander George and Andrew Bennett's 2005 case studies in theory development and social sciences and look at some quotes they have about research objectives. So the first thing they say it's important to understand is what is the phenomenon or type of behavior that is being singled out for examination. That is, what is the class or subclass of events of which the cases will be instances. Okay, this is something I say in other words, probably not as well, all the time with students that when you're looking at a case, you want to say, what is this an example of? What is the class or subclass? Because when you understand that, you understand what literature is relevant, what theory is relevant. So this is just a huge, important first step in setting up and designing your research. The next step, uh, George and Bennett say, is the phenomenon to be explained thought to be an empirical universal, i.e., no variation in the dependent variable, so that the research problem is to account for the lack of variation in the outcomes of the cases. Why is poverty so persistent? Why haven't nations developed? Something along those lines. Or is the goal to explain an observable variation in the dependent variable? And so this is an interesting way about thinking of variations in the dependent variable, what you're trying to explain. And very often part of the case, your decision of what cases to look at, how many cases to look at, will be to consider whether or not you have a variation. But that's not as important a point as this next one. And this is so freaking huge. What theoretical framework will be employed? Is there an existing theory or rival candidate theories that bear on those aspects of the phenomenon or behavior that are to be explained? By the way, let me just comment here that are to be explained, that you want to explain, right? Here we have the intersection of your interest as a researcher and the theories. It's like, hey, I want to explain this thing about this phenomena, right? But it's so important. What's the theoretical framework? So, is there an existing theory? If not, what provisional theory or theories will the researcher formulate for the purpose of the study? If provisional theories are lacking, what theory relevant variables will be considered? So I'm going to say to you, I say to all students, you have to have a theoretical framework. When you pose questions, theories give you potential answers to them. They tell you what information to look at. Having an existing theory or rival theories, it's really great when you have rivals, are so important. And so this is a major point to be made. And again, going back to the class of or subclass of the phenomena, you'll find theories about that class of phenomena. So you have to be able to put your particular case or cases into some class or subclass. Which aspects of the existing theory or theories will be singled out for testing, refinement, or elaboration? And again, this is, well, this is the intersection of your interests, right? What you designate as the scope of the research or the focus of the research and the theory, right? Because theories are going to have certain things that are important and the literature is going to suggest. And so you really want to say, all right, what aspects of the theory am I looking at? Or am I going to single out one theory in particular for testing, refinement, or elaboration, right? And that's interesting. We can test the theory, say whether this is going to be a theory confirming or disconfirming. We could talk about refinement of the theory, say, hey, is there another variable that needs to be there? Or are we going to elaborate on the theory, maybe take it in another direction? So and by the way, refinement could be defining scope conditions, conditions where the theory doesn't apply, right? Elaboration would be more along the lines of bringing in either a new variable, an intervening variable, something along those lines. But this is something you can do with case studies, especially in the view of George and Bennett. Finally, if the research objective is to assess the causal effects or predictions of a particular theory or independent variable, is that theory sufficiently specified and operationalized to enable it to make specific predictions, or is it only capable of making probabilistic or indeterminate predictions? What other variables or conditions need to be taken into account in assessing its causal effects? And so the question here is one, whether the theory is sufficiently specified, meaning have we really explained it well enough, right? Is it understood? And here they're talking about the theory being specified. Very often we're worried about whether the variables that are, perhaps the independent variable of the theory is specified and operationalized enough that you can do it. And that's usually, by the way, a reason to do a case study instead of a quantitative study is that, well, no, the theory is not well enough defined and operationalized that we can measure it across cases. We kind of have to look at a number of things to assess its level. And that could be why you're there in the first place. Here they're saying, hey, is the whole theory itself been, sufficiently specified and operationalized to get to the point where you can make predictions? Or do we have a probabilistic or indeterminate prediction? And, are we at this point looking at other variables, how they interact with something you think is causal, but may not be determinate, right? And this is, again, something you can do with a case study and just another consideration. So here were, I think, some really important considerations about your research objective and things that you should be asking. Some questions may not come up. I really think, if the two takeaways are going to be that class and subclass question and then questions about theory. And I think the meta point is you are thinking in most cases, except for perhaps theory generating case studies, you have a theory and you are using it to structure your analysis. Very important aspect of all of this.